Little girl sees millionaire tied up inside submerged truck. So she does this. Comment telling me what you thought of this story, giving it a score from 0 to 10, and comment what city you're watching me from. I really want to know if you liked my story and I want to get to know you better. So subscribe to my channel to support my work. I count on your help. The sun was rising over Oak Creek when Lily, just 4 years old, was already scavenging the leftovers at the farmer's market in search of a bruised apple or a forgotten vegetable. Her bare feet knew every uneven cobblestone of the streets, every pothole in the asphalt where rainwater accumulated. For 2 months, she had been sleeping under the awning of the municipal market, ever since the woman who looked after her disappeared without explanation, leaving only the scent of lavender that still lingered on the girl's tattered clothes. On that day, the waters of the creek were running murkier than usual. The previous week's flood had dragged branches, trash, and debris downstream, creating a landscape of devastation that still marked the town. Lily was walking along the muddy bank when something caught her attention. Among the bushes, churned by the current, a blue metallic shape partially emerged from the water. It was a fruit truck turned on its side, with the cabin almost completely submerged. The open bed let wooden crates escape, floating away and scattering rotten oranges and bananas into the current. But it was a desperate movement inside the cabin that made the girl's heart race. Through the fogged glass, a grey-haired woman was banging frantically on the windshield, her hands tied behind her back with a thick rope. Her eyes were wide with terror, her mouth open in screams that the water stifled. With every second, the water level rose inside the cabin, already covering her shoulders. "Help! Help!" screamed Lily with all the strength her small lungs allowed, running from one side of the bank to the other. "There's someone here! There's a lady trapped!" Her words echoed through the valley, but the nearest houses were hundreds of yards away. The girl didn't know how to swim, but something inside her screamed that she couldn't just watch that woman drown. She grabbed a long branch and tried to reach the truck, but the current was too strong. It was then that she heard heavy footsteps running down the trail above. Arthur Bennett, 58 years old, was descending the slope with the agility that his 20 years as a firefighter had taught him. Even though he had been retired for 5 years, his instinct remained sharp. The child's screams had pulled him from his solitary breakfast. "What happened, little one?" he asked, quickly assessing the situation. "The lady is trapped inside." Lily pointed to the truck, tears streaming down her dirty cheeks. "She can't get out." Arthur didn't hesitate. He took off his shirt and dove into the freezing water, fighting against the current that tried to drag him away from the vehicle. His muscles, even at 58, still remembered the countless rescues he had performed. He managed to reach the cabin at the exact moment the water rose to the woman's neck. With a piece of iron found in the wreckage, he broke the side window. Water gushed out as he quickly cut the ropes binding the victim. The woman was unconscious but still breathing faintly. Arthur carried her to the bank, where Lily waited anxiously, her small hands clasped in prayer. "Is she going to be okay?" the girl asked, watching as Arthur administered first aid. "Yes, she is," he replied, feeling her pulse strengthen. "You saved her life, you know. If you hadn't screamed for help." The woman opened her eyes slowly, coughing up water and mud. Her grey hair was plastered to her face, but even in shock there was a natural dignity in her features. She looked around, confused, until her eyes met Lily's. "A child. Was it a child who saved me?" she whispered with a raspy voice. "She's the one who called me," explained Arthur, helping her sit up. "What is your name, ma'am? I need to understand what happened here." "Eleanor?" she replied, shivering. "Eleanor Vance, my nephews. They brought me here by force." Her voice broke. "They wanted me to sign some papers, to sell the family company. When I refused, they—" She looked at the red marks on her wrists where the ropes had cut into her skin. Arthur felt a rage growing in his chest. During his years as a firefighter, he had seen much human evil, but this was especially cruel. "Your own nephews did this to you." Eleanor nodded, tears mixing with the river water on her face. "Richard and Victoria. They said no one would miss me, that I was just a stubborn old woman getting in the way of the family business." Lily approached timidly and touched Eleanor's hand. "You smell just like my mommy," she said with her childish voice. "She had pretty hair like yours too." Something in that child's touch deeply moved Eleanor's heart. Throughout the ordeal in the water, she had thought she would die alone and forgotten. But here was a ragged little girl who didn't know her from anywhere, offering the only comfort she could give. "Where are your parents, child?" asked Eleanor, noticing Lily's torn clothes and bruised feet. "I don't have any," the girl replied simply. "I've lived on the street since Aunt Grace went away." Arthur and Eleanor exchanged a look loaded with meaning. Here were an abandoned child and an elderly woman betrayed by her own family, united by a moment of crisis that would change their lives forever. But none of them yet understood that this meeting on the banks of the creek was just the beginning of a much more complex plot, involving family secrets buried for years and an inheritance worth much more than money. Arthur's house was a 15-minute walk from the riverbank, a simple two-bedroom structure painted faded blue, surrounded by a garden he hadn't tended to in years. Since losing his wife in a car accident, the place had become just a shelter where he slept and ate mechanically, without life or purpose. But that afternoon, for the first time in a long while, there was movement in the kitchen. Eleanor, wrapped in a thick blanket, sipped chamomile tea while watching Lily ravenously eat a bowl of hearty stew. The girl ate, as if she hadn't seen decent food in weeks, but she still chewed slowly, savoring every bite. "Slow down, little one," said Eleanor gently. "No one is going to take your food away." Lily stopped eating and looked at her with those big, expressive eyes. "Are you sure, ma'am? Sometimes people say that, but then they change their minds." The sentence broke Arthur's heart. He sat at the table, studying the child's face. There was something familiar about her, something he couldn't identify. "Lily, do you remember where you came from? Where you lived before the streets?" The girl furrowed her brow as if trying to reach distant memories. "I lived in a house with lots of plants. Aunt Grace made medicines with them. She said I was her little helper." Eleanor almost dropped her cup. "Home remedies? What kind of remedies?" "For coughs, for tummy aches, for when people were sad," replied Lily naturally. "Aunt Grace knew all the little plants. She said they had secrets to help people." A heavy silence took over the kitchen. Eleanor felt her heart race, but tried to keep her voice calm. "This Aunt Grace, what was she like? Do you remember her face?" Lily closed her eyes, concentrating. "She was pretty. Her hair smelled like lavender, just like yours, Mom. And she always sang when she worked with the plants." Arthur noticed that Eleanor had gone pale. "Mrs. Vance, are you all right?" "Evelyn," she whispered, more to herself than to the others. "My sister Evelyn had a daughter. But she—" Eleanor cut herself off, unable to continue. At that moment, loud knocks on the door interrupted the conversation. Arthur went to answer it, finding two well-dressed young people on the porch. The man, about 30, had an angular face and cold eyes. The woman beside him, a few years younger, tried to look worried, but there was something calculating in her expression. "Good afternoon," said the man with false cordiality. "We are Richard and Victoria Vance. We are looking for our aunt, Eleanor. We heard she might be here." Arthur blocked the entrance with his body. "And who said that?" "A fisherman told us about the accident at the river," explained Victoria, trying to see inside the house. "We were desperate when we found out Auntie had disappeared from home." "Desperate?" Arthur couldn't hide the sarcasm. Strange. According to her, you were the ones who tied her up and left her to drown. The masks of concern fell instantly. Richard took a step forward, intimidatingly. Look here, old man. I don't know what lies our aunt told you, but she isn't right in the head. She needs medical care. The only care she needs is to stay far away from you two. From inside the house came Eleanor's trembling but determined voice. Let them in, Arthur. I want to hear what they have to say. Richard pushed Arthur aside and entered the living room, followed by Victoria. When they saw Eleanor sitting at the kitchen table, their faces transformed into masks of false joy. Aunt Eleanor, thank God you're okay. Victoria ran to hug her, but Eleanor pulled away. Spare me the performance, she said dryly. Just say what you want. Richard sighed theatrically. Auntie, we know you were scared by our proposal, but you need to understand it's for your own good. The company is going bankrupt. The preserves don't sell like they used to. Lies, retorted Eleanor. Sales doubled in the last year. You're ill-informed, insisted Victoria. We have the reports. If we don't sell now, we'll lose everything. It was then that Lily appeared in the kitchen doorway, curious about the argument. When Richard saw her, his face lost all colour. Victoria stifled a scream. What is that girl doing here? Asked Richard with a strange voice. She saved me, replied Eleanor, closely watching her nephew's reactions. And you know her. It wasn't a question. The mutual recognition was too obvious to ignore. Lily hid behind Arthur, but her eyes remained fixed on Richard with an expression of deep fear. I know him, she whispered. He went to Aunt Grace's house. They fought a lot. Victoria tried to control the situation. Auntie, the child is confusing people. We've never seen her before. But Richard was visibly nervous, sweating despite the mild weather. Victoria, let's go. We'll settle this later. No, said Eleanor, standing up. We will settle this now. Lily, tell me about this fight. What do you remember? The girl looked at Richard with fear, but the protective presence of Arthur and Eleanor gave her courage. He yelled at Aunt Grace. He said she was stubborn and was ruining everything. Then he took some important papers and left. Aunt Grace cried a lot. The silence that followed was so tense it seemed to vibrate in the air. Eleanor looked at Richard with an expression mixing horror and realization. My God, she murmured. Evelyn died 2 years ago, and this child. Where did you leave her after my sister passed away? Richard, I don't know what you're talking about, he replied, but his voice trembled. Liar, exploded Eleanor. You were responsible for finding a home for her daughter. You told me you had found an adoptive family in another city. Lily began to cry silently. Memories were coming back like pieces of a painful puzzle. He took me in a car and left me at the market. He said someone was coming to get me, but no one came. Victoria tried a final defense. Auntie, are you believing the fantasies of a traumatized child? Get out of my sight, said Eleanor with a coldness that cut like ice. Get out, both of you, now, and never come back. Richard tried one last card. You'll regret this, Auntie. Without our help, you'll lose everything Evelyn and you built. I prefer losing everything to having you nearby, she replied. After the nephews left, Eleanor knelt in front of Lily and gently held her small shoulders. My dear, are you my sister Evelyn's daughter? Lily nodded, still crying. Aunt Grace said she had a sister who made yummy jams. She always talked about you, ma'am. Eleanor hugged the girl tightly, her own tears falling onto the child's messy hair. You are my niece, you are family, and I swear I will never let anyone hurt you again. Arthur watched the scene with emotion, but also with growing concern. If Richard had lied about Lily's whereabouts and was trying to force Eleanor to sell the company, there was much more at stake than he had imagined. And by the threatening look he had seen on the young man's face as he left, that family war was just beginning. The following months brought a routine that none of the three had experienced in years. Lily blossomed under the care of Eleanor and Arthur, gaining weight and color in her cheeks. The faded blue house gained new life, with childish laughter echoing through the rooms, and the aroma of Eleanor's traditional recipes filling the kitchen. But it was during an autumn morning that Arthur noticed something worrying. Lily had woken up with a dry, persistent cough, and her breathing seemed more difficult than usual. Initially, everyone thought it was just a common cold, but when the girl began having trouble playing in the yard without getting tired, Eleanor insisted on taking her to the doctor. Dr. Henry Carter, the town's general practitioner, examined Lily with special care. After a series of tests, his face assumed a grave expression that made Eleanor's heart race. "I need to be direct with you," he said, closing the file. "Lily has severe asthma, possibly aggravated by years of exposure to street conditions. But there is something more concerning. I detected signs that she may be developing early pulmonary fibrosis." "What does that mean?" asked Arthur, holding the girl's hand. "It means the tissue in her lungs is hardening. It's rare in children, but it can happen when there is prolonged exposure to irritants or untreated respiratory infections." Eleanor went pale. "Is there a treatment?" "There is, but it is expensive and complex. She will need imported medications, specialized respiratory therapies, and possibly some procedures. We are talking about at least $50,000 over the next 2 years. The silence that followed was deafening. Arthur mentally calculated his retirement savings. They barely covered a few months of treatment. Eleanor thought of the preserves company, which was still recovering from years of mismanagement during her forced absence. "We will do whatever is necessary," she said finally. "This child has suffered enough already." On the drive back home, Lily remained quiet in the back seat of the car. Despite being 5 years old, she had perfectly understood that she was sick and that it was causing worry to the adults she loved. "Aunt Ellie," she said, using the affectionate nickname she had created for Eleanor, "if I cost too much money, you can leave me at the hospital. I understand." Eleanor braked sharply and turned around, her eyes shining with tears. "Never, never say that again. You are our family now. Family is not abandoned for money." That night, after Lily fell asleep, Eleanor and Arthur talked in the kitchen until late. She had made a decision she knew was risky, but necessary. "I'm going to sell the plots on the east side of the property," she announced. "It's 10 acres we never use for anything. With that money, I can pay for her treatment, and there will still be enough left to expand the preserves production." "Are you sure?" asked Arthur. "Those lands have been in the family for generations. Evelyn would do the same for her daughter, and I do it for ours." The next day, Eleanor went to the notary to start the sale process. But when she arrived, she received the most devastating news of her life. "Mrs. Vance," said the clerk with obvious discomfort, "there is a problem. Those lands have already been sold." "What do you mean, sold? I didn't authorize any sale." The man showed the documents. "Here is your signature, authorizing the sale to Green Valley Developers. The transaction was finalized 3 months ago." Eleanor examined the papers with growing horror. The signature was perfect, indistinguishable from hers, but she knew with absolute certainty that she had never signed that. "This is forgery," she exclaimed. 3 months ago, I was recovering at Mr. Bennett's house. I was never at this office." "Ma'am, I understand your concern, but the documentation is in order. There are witnesses, notarized signatures." Eleanor left the office shaking with rage and despair. She didn't need to be a detective to know who was behind this. Richard had access to all the family documents and knew her signature perfectly. Upon arriving home, she found a scene that made her feel as if the world was collapsing. Victoria was sitting in the living room, drinking tea and chatting animatedly with Lily, who was showing her drawings to the woman. "Hello, Aunt Eleanor," said Victoria with a smile that was too sweet. "I hope you don't mind my visit. I missed the family so much." Arthur, who was in the kitchen preparing lunch, whispered in Eleanor's ear. "She showed up an hour ago, said she wanted to apologize and get to know her niece better." "Victoria," said Eleanor, controlling her voice, "can I speak with you? In private?" "Of course, Auntie." In the backyard garden, away from Lily's ears, Eleanor confronted her niece. "I know what you did, the sale of the land." Victoria kept the smile, but her eyes hardened. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Forgery is a crime, Victoria, and I will prove it." "Good luck," replied the young woman coldly. "The documentation is perfect, and who will believe an old woman found half dead in the river, speaking nonsense?" It was at that moment Eleanor realized the true extent of the betrayal. "You didn't come here to apologize. Why did you come?" "To see how you're managing," admitted Victoria. "And I discovered something interesting. The girl is sick, isn't she? Expensive treatment." Eleanor's blood ran cold. "You were listening to our conversations. The walls are thin, and you talk loud when you're worried." At that moment, Lily appeared at the door, holding a drawing. "Aunt Ellie, I made a drawing of our family. Want to see?" The drawing showed 4 figures holding hands: herself, Eleanor, Arthur, and surprisingly, a 4th female figure. "Who is this here, sweetie?" asked Eleanor, pointing to the extra figure. "It's Aunt Victoria. She said she's part of our family now, too." Eleanor looked at Victoria with a mixture of horror and realization. Her niece had spent the entire morning manipulating a sick 5-year-old child. "Victoria, get off my property, now." "Oh, Auntie, how rude. I was just being nice to my niece." "She is not your niece. You lost that right when you abandoned a child on the street." Victoria stood up, all pretense of cordiality disappearing. "You'll regret kicking me out. Without the money from the land, how will you pay for her treatment? Let's see. Maybe you need to sell the whole company. And guess who will be waiting with a generous offer?" After Victoria left, Eleanor sat on the garden floor and cried like she hadn't cried since Evelyn's death. Arthur found her like that and sat beside her. "They stole the money for Lily's treatment," she said between sobs. "And now they are playing with her, making her believe they are family." "We'll find another way," said Arthur firmly. "I can sell my house, use my pension. It's not enough, and you know it." That night, while Lily slept, her light snores caused by respiratory difficulty echoing through the room, Eleanor made the hardest decision of her life. If she couldn't recover the stolen land, she would have to consider the last option remaining, selling the preserves company she and Evelyn had built together, the legacy of 2 generations of the Vance family. But as she watched the child sleep, an iron determination grew in her chest. Richard and Victoria had underestimated one thing: how much a woman can fight when she is protecting someone she loves. And Eleanor Vance was just starting to fight. 3 weeks after the discovery of the forgery, Eleanor woke up before dawn with a strange feeling. The house was too quiet. She got up quickly and ran to Lily's room, finding the bed empty. Her heart raced as she searched the whole house, shouting the girl's name. It was Arthur who found her in the backyard garden, kneeling among the medicinal plants he had cultivated, following the instructions Lily herself had given. The girl held in her small hands a handful of mullein and mint leaves. "Lily, what are you doing out here in the cold?" The girl turned, her little face pale but eyes shining with excitement. "Aunt Ellie, I remembered. Aunt Grace hid medicines for me, special medicines she made just for my cough. Honey, that was a long time ago. The medicines must have spoiled by now." "No, no," insisted Lily, getting up and running towards the house. "She hid them in a special box. She said if I got sick and she wasn't around, I should look for the box." Eleanor and Arthur looked at each other. Since they had discovered Lily's true identity, she had been recovering more memories of life with Evelyn. But this was the first time she mentioned hidden medicines. "Where would this box be, little one?" asked Arthur gently. in the old house, the house where I lived with Aunt Grace. Eleanor felt her stomach tighten. Evelyn's house had been sold after her death to pay medical debts. But maybe there was still a chance. 2 hours later, the three were in front of a small house on the outskirts of Oak Creek. The new owner, Mrs. Miller, was a nice lady who had known Evelyn by sight. "Of course you can look," she said after hearing the story. "The house was full of plants and jars when I bought it. I kept everything in the shed out back, thinking someone from the family would come to get it." The shed was dark and smelled of dried herbs. Among dusty boxes and old equipment, Lily ran directly to a specific corner, as if guided by instinct. "Here, it's here!" she shouted, pointing to a wooden box buried under some old cloths. Inside the box, carefully wrapped in dark glass, were dozens of bottles with syrups, tinctures, and ointments. Each had a handwritten label in Evelyn's handwriting: "For Lily, night cough; for Lily, difficult breathing; for Lily, when feeling weak." Eleanor held one of the bottles with trembling hands. She knew. Evelyn knew you would get sick and prepared all this. But it was when Arthur examined the box more carefully that he made a discovery that would change everything. At the bottom, there was a sealed envelope with the name Eleanor written in large letters. With trembling fingers, Eleanor opened the envelope and pulled out a letter and some documents. When she began to read, her legs went weak and she had to lean against the shed wall. "What does it say?" asked Arthur, worried. "Evelyn, she left a secret will," whispered Eleanor. "She knew she was sick and didn't have much time. She left half of her share in the company to Lily, but hid it from Richard." Arthur took the documents. They were notarized copies of a will registered in another county, far from Richard's reach. According to the document, Lily was the legitimate heir to 25% of the Preserves Company's shares. "This means," began Arthur. "This means Richard cannot sell anything without her authorization," completed Eleanor, her voice growing in excitement and hope. "And since Lily is a minor, I am her legal guardian now." That afternoon, Eleanor marched straight to the family lawyer's office, carrying the documents as if they were treasures. Mr. Rodriguez, who had known the Vances for decades, was flabbergasted as he examined the papers. "This changes everything, Mrs. Vance. If Lily is a partner in the company, all transactions made without her consent are void." "Including the sale of the land?" "Including the sale of the land." Jitil. The legal battle that followed lasted 2 intense months. Richard tried everything to disqualify the will, claiming Evelyn was not in a mental state to make it. But Victoria, in a twist no one expected, turned against her brother. "I can't take it anymore," she said during a hearing at the courthouse. "Richard convinced me to participate in this, saying it was for the good of the family. But abandoning a child on the street, that went too far." She revealed how Richard had forged Eleanor's signature, how he had hidden Evelyn's will, and mostly how he had lied about Lily's whereabouts all these years. The judge, clearly moved by the girl's testimony, who spoke with impressive articulation for her 5 years about how safe she felt with Eleanor and Arthur, ordered the annulment of all fraudulent sales. Richard was ordered to return all the stolen money and pay substantial compensation for the damages caused. Financially and socially ruined, he agreed to work as a regular employee in the company he had tried to steal in a last attempt to remain connected to the family. Victoria, genuinely remorseful, gave up her share of the inheritance in favor of Lily. "It's the least I can do," she said with tears in her eyes. "That child lost 2 years of treatment because of our mistakes." 6 months later, life in the Blue House had completely transformed. Lily, now with proper treatment, and Evelyn's home remedies complementing modern medicine, breathed better and ran through the yard like any healthy child. Arthur, who throughout the process had revealed himself to be a loyal and protective companion, received an unexpected proposal from Eleanor. "I want you to be my partner in the company," she said on a sunny afternoon, while they watched Lily play in the garden that was now a true laboratory of medicinal plants. "Eleanor, I don't know anything about preserves, but you understand caring for people, and you understand loyalty. That is what our family needs now." Arthur accepted not just the partnership in business, but also what was implied in the proposal. They had become a family, in fact, united not by blood, but by choices and mutual sacrifices. Lily, now 6 years old and officially heiress to a considerable fortune, kept her natural simplicity and kindness. Every morning before going to school, she spent time in the garden tending to the medicinal plants. "I'm going to continue Aunt Grace's work," she would say to anyone who wanted to hear. "I'm going to help people who are sick just like she did." And on a special afternoon, when she turned 6, Lily received an unexpected visit. Richard, humble and visibly transformed by months of hard work and reflection, brought a gift. A notebook where he had written down all the home remedy recipes he managed to remember Evelyn making. "I thought you might like to have this," he said shyly, "to continue helping people like your mother did." Lily accepted the notebook and, to everyone's surprise, hugged the uncle who had once abandoned her. "Thank you, Uncle Richard. Aunt Grace always said people can change if they really want to." At that moment, watching the family reunited in the garden, perfumed by medicinal plants, Eleanor knew Evelyn would be proud. The company was thriving again. Lily was growing healthy and loved, and everyone had learned that true family is built with love, forgiveness, and second chances. The girl who once looked for food in the scraps of a market now played in her own garden, surrounded by people who would give their lives for her. And when she looked to the future, she saw not only the continuation of her mother's legacy of medicinal plants, but the certainty that she would always have a home where she was truly loved. If you liked this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment what you thought of my story, giving it a score from 0 to 10. And thank you very much.